there are a few things in this life as unbelievably unpleasant to me as Zelda 1 First Quest Dungeon 6. So if you've played Zelda 1, like, you of course know there's the 8 main story dungeons, and then there's Death Mountain, which is the final dungeon. You know, you've got, dungeon 1, 2, 3, whatever. Like, they're all numbered. They don't have special names or anything, but, like, and there is an order, but you are free to tackle them in slightly different ways. It's not full freedom, but it's essentially like that. And, you'd expect, like, the challenge and everything to, like, ramp up between them. And it's not 100% consistent, because, then that would be just a little bit boring. But, you go through, you get upgrades, and, with every dungeon you complete, you get an upgrade that's useful from then on out, because you can find dungeon items, you can find out information from old men in the dungeons, you can do all that. But Dungeon 6 is garbage. And I'm sorry if Dungeon 6 from Zelda 1 is, like, your favorite dungeon of all time. If, like, you play it every day, you're like, this is the best thing I've ever done. But it's not, okay? And I don't hate it. I don't hate all of it. But it's playing it itself. Like, the concept of the dungeon is actually quite good, because the whole theme of the dungeon is around wizrobes, which are the, primary enemy of the dungeon. Basically, there's two types of wizrobes. There's the orange ones and there's the blue ones, right? The orange ones, teleport around, do what they do, and the blue ones move around and can phase through walls. Whenever the orange ones teleport, they'll shoot out one little beam. Sorry. But the blue ones will, at random points, stop teleporting and just fire out a continuous stream of beams. Now, these beams are not blockable with the normal shield, but they are blockable with the magical shield. For context, the magical shield is an item that can only be bought in, like, shops around the world. And there are plenty of shops where you can just walk in and see a magical shield. But in those shops, it is 130 rupees. And rupees are already a little bit scarce in Zelda 1. Like, they're super easy to grind for. It's not fun to grind for them, per se, but you definitely can get 130 rupees, no problem. And there is a secret shop hidden in the corner of the forest overlooking the lake, or the river, whatever it is, right here, where you can get a magical shield for 90 rupees, which is the cheapest it appears in the game. And so, anytime I play, I get the candle for 60 rupees, I go and burn that down, get the magical shield, easy peasy. Right. And from then on, it's just like blocking any other attack. A Moblin arrow, an Octorok rock, a Goyra boomerang, doesn't matter. You can just hold there, and it blocks the magical attack. And you know what? That's pretty good. But then the problem is, when you introduce the second main enemy of the dungeon, and also the second enemy introduced in Dungeon 6, the like. Now, like-likes are a really cool enemy. I definitely like them. Like, the idea of an enemy that can debuff the player if they attack it, like, really adds tension. Like, you're saying, oh man, I can't let this thing get near me, because if it does, then I'm going to lose my magical shield. Because that's what it does. If it catches you and holds you for too long, you lose your magical shield. And, what I like about like-likes is that they don't immediately take your shield. Like, if they touch you, you've got about maybe a second, maybe half a second. I'm not sure exactly how long, but, like, you have a little bit of leeway before your shield disappears. So, and you can still slash your sword, use your items, do everything you do. So there is leeway, and it's a well-designed enemy in that regard. And so the like-likes and the wizrobes. If it was just like-likes and wizrobes, then I would really like the dungeon, because it would be like, alright, I've got to carefully maneuver myself so that I don't get hit by the wizrobe magic beams. I've got to, but I've also got to keep on my toes so the like doesn't catch me, because if it does catch me, then I'll lose my magical shield, and then I'll be completely defenseless against the wizrobes. items. That sounds like really good design, doesn't it? But it's ruined by the addition of one more enemy type, the Cursed Bubble. Now, in the entire game up to this point, Cursed Bubbles have just been like a little thing. Maybe they appeared every so often. You know, they move around the room randomly. You know, and if they hit you for about 2 or 3 seconds, you can't use your sword. You know, your sword comes back after a while. It's not like the Quest 2 Cursed Bubbles that like permanently make you lose your sword, like for real permanently. But no, just the Cursed Bubbles, you can't use your sword for just a little bit of time. You know, and it's fine. In every other part of the dungeon, like you've got, you know, your boomerang, you've got bombs, you've got bow and arrow. Like, there's a ton of things you can do without your sword. Sure, your sword is your most consistent and probably your most powerful option at any given time. And also, like, it's not expendable like bombs are, or arrows. But Cursed Bubbles in Dungeon 6. So the problem with Cursed Bubbles in Dungeon 6 is that the only weapon, and I mean this, the only weapon capable of damaging a Wizrobe is the sword, right? Fire doesn't harm them, you know, bombs don't harm them, the boomerang doesn't even stun them, you know, arrows do nothing to them. The only way to harm a Wizrobe is with the sword, right? And, you know, once a like has grabbed you, pretty much the only thing that can harm them too is the sword. The bomb's gonna take too long, you know, it's wrapped around you, so your bow and arrow doesn't really work on it, the boomerang doesn't really work on it. So when the like gets you, your only way to hurt it is the sword, and the only way to hurt a Wizrobe is the sword. Alright. And in almost every room where there are Wizrobes and likes, there are also Cursed Bubbles. And so, like, that's the problem here. See, so you walk into the room, you know, and this is a very, very possible situation because likes move randomly, Wizrobes teleport randomly, blue Wizrobes can do whatever the hell they want, and likes chase you, like they go straight for you. So imagine this, and this is something that happens to me almost every time when I'm playing Zelda 1, at least once in the playthrough. Alright, I walk into the room, I'm trying to take out the Wizrobes because they deal a huge amount of damage, and I'm trying to avoid the likes which are chasing me. But then the Cursed Bubble gets in the way. I'm pinned between a like and a Cursed Bubble and a Wizrobe. I get hit by the Cursed Bubble. I get smacked by the Wizrobe because I was trying to correct to fend off the like. The like grabs me because of the knockback, right? So, and then it gets me, and I can't use my sword because, you know, I was just hit by a Cursed Bubble. And so the like takes my shield. I finally get my sword back, take out the like, and then the Wizrobes just start wailing on me because I can literally not defend myself from them anymore. So, like, and I know this sounds very nitpicky and specific, but there are so many rooms in Dungeon 6 that have Wizrobes, likes, and Cursed Bubbles. And I also have to add, like, if you don't know about the secret shop where you can get the magical shield for 90 rupees, you have to grind out 130 rupees every time you want to replace your magical shield. And even if you know about the 90 rupee one, that's still 90 rupees. Like, I don't know. Like, and this is in the game where the biggest rupee value, like, it can drop from an enemy, is 5 rupees. And there's only a few specific enemies that commonly drop 5 rupees. Most enemies drop nothing, honestly. Okay, but still, so, right. So you do all that. You make it through, you know, you manage to avoid the likes, the Cursed Bubbles don't hit you by some miracle. You get through all the Wizrobes. Let me talk a little more about Wizrobes, because orange Wizrobes, I honestly have no problem with. They're great. You know, they teleport around, there's usually a large group of them. You know, you've got to think about positioning, because a lot of Zelda 1 works on that grid system. You're thinking, alright, if the enemy's here, I don't want to be within their X and Y lines of sight, because then they can attack me. It's part of what makes the iron knuckles so nice in Zelda 1, because you're thinking, like, sure, they're a bit of a pain to deal with, but they're fun because you can exploit that XY system to think about, how am I going to defeat them, how am I going to position myself, all that kind of stuff. Blue Wizrobes completely messed that up. And I'll tell you why. Because they can move diagonally. When they do their little teleport maneuver, they can move diagonally. And when they teleport, it's fast. It's not like they're going, oh, I'm going to teleport. It's at any point they can just flash, and they can charge at you, they can move through a wall, and if you bump into the wall, you take damage, because that's what it is. Now, a lot of their pathfinding isn't exactly the best, and sometimes if there's a long row of blocks, they'll just end up going on that row of blocks over and over, and then you can hit them. But, at any point, they can pop out of the wall and just, charge at you. And also, you don't know when they're going to fire their beams. They don't do it very often because they're usually too busy phasing through the same wall over and over again. But when they do, it's just non-stop, and you don't really have a chance to do it because in Zelda 1, when you attack, your shield drops. So, I don't know. And so you're either going to fend off this barrage of magical attacks, or you're going to attack the Like-Likes and the other Wizrobes that are teleporting around you. And it's tough, like, and at some points it's fun. Like I said, I'm not always filled with an uncontrollable rage for Dungeon 6, but when it's good, it's okay, but when it's bad, it's probably well, you gotta think about it, because Dungeon 9 is very heavily based on Dungeon 6. Like, there are a lot of rooms in Dungeon 9 that have Wizrobes, Curse Bubbles, and Like-Likes in them, Wizrobes are the main enemy of Dungeon 9, but I don't know, it's something about Dungeon 6, with that being the theme of the whole thing, as opposed to Dungeon 9, which is more, varied and interesting, because Dungeon 9, you've got, the little Patra enemies, you've got, Landmolas, you've got, all sorts of Iron Knuckles, you've got all these varied enemies. It's a very large dungeon. Let's see, I don't remember what Dungeon 6 is shaped like, because that is important. Another thing, the item of Dungeon 6, the magic wand. I will be honest, the magic wand is, I like it. It's, I don't know, it's fun. It's just fun. You get to just stand there, cast some spells. When you get the magic book from Dungeon 8, you can cast fire from it. And it also once you do that, it eliminates the need to use the candle to light rooms, because now you can just not only attack, but also light up rooms, and also you can deal extra damage, lingering hitboxes. It's good, very good for getting rid of keys, not in these sections, because then the fire can linger on the ladders, which makes you have to wait. But just for the rooms full of keys, it's a great item. But the problem is, really anything else, like, it's weak. Like the magic, little thing you shoot out, it's weak. And once again, like every other item in the game, it doesn't harm Wizrobes, and that's super weird, because like the wand itself, when you poke it out, it counts as like a sword hitbox, and it damages things that the sword would damage, but not Wizrobes. Apparently, Wizrobes are immune to magical spells. Okay. And it also takes a long time. It doesn't use many resources like the bow and arrows do. But, gosh, I don't know. It's just, I really struggle finding a place where, like, it's the most optimal option, aside from clearing out rooms of Keys or, Zols. No, sorry, Gels. No, Zols, great, love Zols. Love that one room in Dungeon 6 where there are 2 Zols. Great, love that room. Let's see. I don't know. Like, when I'm in a room with likes, Wizrobes, and Cursed Bubbles, like, I know I'm going to get hit by a Cursed Bubble, so I equip the Magic Wand, and I use that to fend off likes while I'm waiting for, the sword to come back. But it's weak. It's so weak. And it's, once again, it's useless against the Wizrobes. And the whole time you're just saying, this is kind of fun, but I just wish I had my sword back so I could, stab them. I want to stab them, but I can't stab them because of the Cursed Bubbles. Alright. And then there's the boss in Dungeon 6. Alright. So I've brought up the bows and arrows a few times. So let me just go over that whole thing again. Alright. The bow is the item of Dungeon 1. Like, the boomerang, sure, you find it in Dungeon 1, but the bow is the dungeon item of Dungeon 1. Like, it's in the little thing where you go underground, you find the little secret room, the bow's in there. Alright, so all the way back in the very first dungeon of the game, you find the bow. And that's great. At that point in the game, you can't use it. You're like, well, I know this is a bow, obviously, so I need to find some arrows. So you go around the world, you get to the east coast of Hyrule, and you go, well, look, here's a vendor that sells arrows. Yeah, for 80 rupees, just shell out 80 rupees, no big deal. Alright. And then once you buy, the arrows for 80 rupees, every time you want to fire an arrow, it costs 1 rupee. And, from like a roleplay storytelling perspective, it kind of makes sense because, you bought the quiver for 80 rupees, and now every arrow you fire is saying, well, I bought that arrow for 1 rupee. So it's saying I retroactively had this many arrows in my quiver, so I spent this many rupees. It takes a little bit of time, but it's fine. Alright, so let's reasonably assume that the player picked up the bow and they picked up the arrows, because nothing tells you to pick up the arrows, but the bow is pretty easy to pick up, and the arrows are just the natural next up. Okay, this car in front of me is dropping a lot of gravel. It's kind of okay. Give me a second. Trucks, am I right? Okay, so let's see. I don't know. Alright, but so... Okay, yeah, so you got the bow, you got the arrows. Yep. And, I don't know, there's people all over the game saying, a secret power is said to be in the arrow. Go in the direction of the arrow. And then there's one guy that's like, aim for the eyes of Goma. And you're like, gee, I wonder what that is. Because there are people in the dungeons, old men. Meet the old man. Yeah, so, old men that are like giving you clues for everything. They're telling you about the world. They're like, oh, did you get the sword on top of the waterfall? Walk into the waterfall. Go to the next room. Yeah, do that thing. Alright, yeah, get out of here. Go to the next room. Okay, but no, so, right. And so, for Dungeon 2, you'll hear, the old man say, Dodongo dislikes smoke, which is a clue to use bombs on the Dodongo boss. Dungeon 5, here's Digdogger hates a certain type of noise, which is a clue to use, the recorder on Digdogger, without which he's invincible. in Dungeon 6, you get aim for the eyes of Goma, which is a clue to use the bow and arrow on the boss of Dungeon 6, which is a little crab guy, Goma, with one big eye. And, it's pretty simple. Goma walks side to side, back and forth, and when the eyes open, you just gotta shoot Goma in the eye once, and that's it. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, Aquamentus, smack it with the sword a few times, 6 times, honestly. Dodongo, there's 3 of them, 2 bombs each. You've got to think about positioning and getting it in their mouth, actually. Super fun. Dungeon 3. Was it the boss of Dungeon 3? Oh, yeah. Dungeon 3, Manhandla, you've got to think about, alright, am I going to use a bomb and take out all 4 heads at once, or I'm going to use the sword, but then risk taking more damage, or do I want to use my limited resource of bombs and take out the heads all at once, which is risky, because then I've got to get close to it, and I don't know. Like, there's multiple ways to approach Manhandla. Great boss. Love Manhandla. I think it was like a Hyrule Warriors game where Manhandla reappeared, but now they're like weird. I don't know. Manhandla's great. Gleeok. You've got to kite Gleeok. Look out for the fireballs, and the heads go around. So the more damage you do to Gleeok, the more chaotic the fight becomes. And, I'm really glad they brought him back so many times, like, throughout the games. Like, as like a mini boss, or, the boss of Dungeon 8. You're like, this is great. I love it. I think Gleeok really is my favorite boss of Zelda 1. I know I just gushed so much about Manhandla, but Gleeok is my favorite. Glad he appeared in, Tears of the Kingdom. Not as cool, but, still kind of cool. Alright, let's see. Dungeon 5, Dig Dogger. You've got to, hit him with the, recorder, and then you can use the boomerang to stun the heads. But there's 3 of them, and they start going super fast, and there's fireballs in the corners of the room. So it sort of becomes like a bullet hell to try and take out Dig Dogger. But you could set a bomb, play the recorder, and then potentially, instantly kill all 3 of the little eyes. So just like Manhandla, there's multiple ways to approach the boss. You can either just stab it with the sword, you can try to take them all out with a bomb, you can use the boomerang, the bow and arrow. Okay, but there's so many ways to do it. So even though Dig Dogger is a really simple boss, it's very likable. And, Dungeon 7, they reuse Aquamentus. Dungeon 8, they reuse Gleeok. That's not what we're really talking about. What we're talking about is Dungeon 6 with Goma. I'm going to shoot it once with my bow and arrow, and it dies. 1 hit, that's it. And, it's a little tricky to hit because, it's moving back and forth, and the eyes only open for a short amount of time, but 1 hit? And there is a blue Goma that appears later in the game that takes 3 hits, and I'm thinking, well, why wasn't the actual Goma like this, Because nothing else you can do will damage Goma in any way. Bombs doesn't work, sword doesn't work, boomerang doesn't work, doesn't do anything. Well, it's a lot like the Wizards. Only one thing harms them. But still, even, I don't know, even Dodongo, who can only be harmed with bombs, even Gleeok, who can only be harmed with the sword, even Aquamentus, who can only be harmed with the sword, I don't know. You think about it, wouldn't it be more interesting if it was more like the blue Goma at the end of Dungeon 6? Imagine if Dodongos died in 1 bomb. Sure, they're a little tricky to hit with the bomb, but, and I know technically you can put a bomb on the side of a Dodongo, it blows up, and then you can hit it with the sword, but that's still 2 hits. Goma is basically if a Dodongo died in 1 hit from a bomb. It's a little tricky to hit it, but once you do, it's instantly dead. Not to mention that if you equip the bows and arrows and then you walk into the room and immediately fire, it just dies. I mean, it's just nice if you want to speed run the game, but still, like, come on. I don't know. Like, I know it's nitpicky. Like, I know this is probably something only I have a problem with, but I don't know. It's just a lame boss. I really don't like it, okay? But anyways, so you go through Dungeon 6, you get the piece of the Triforce, and then you're done with it. Until Dungeon 9, where you start getting flashbacks, and then, you know, you're curled up on a ball on the floor, you know, rocking back and forth. Okay. So when I approach Dungeon 6, I usually like to have absolutely everything I can. I go through Dungeon 7 and Dungeon 8 before I go to Dungeon 6, you know. I've got the blue ring, I've got the magic book, so my magic wand will be as effective as possible, as early as possible. You know, I've got the fully upgraded sword, I've got, you know, not all but one of the heart containers. I've got really everything I can, right? I've got the magic shield, of course we're going to have the magic shield, but I've pretty much gotten every single thing I can in the game before I go to Dungeon 6, because if you don't, like, once again, blue Wizrobes especially, deal a huge amount of damage just by running into you, or with their, you know, beam attack, you know, with their psychic attack, you know. And you can't go into Dungeon 9 until you complete Dungeon 6, so it's not like you can say, oh, well, I'm just going to get the, you know, the red tunic, I'm going to take less damage. You can't do that because of how Zelda 1 works, you know. And I know this isn't like, these aren't critical game design flaws. Having likes, cursed bubbles, and Wizrobes in the same room, there's nothing wrong with that. It makes the game a little more frustrating, sure. It makes the game more difficult. Yeah, you want a little bit of frustration, you want a little bit of difficulty. But and on its own, that would be fine. But the fact that I have to spend, like, 10 minutes grinding for rupees every time I, you know, get hit by a random cursed bubble and lose my shield and die to the Wizrobes, like, anytime that happens, I've got to go and spend, you know, the next 10 minutes of my life just going back and forth, killing Tektites and Levers in a row. Love Levers, by the way, my favorite enemy from the Zelda game. That's not a boss. Let's see. I don't know. I've got to do that for minimum 90 rupees every time I want to go back in. Like, that's not fun, you know? Like I said, it's fine to have a little frustration and a little difficulty, and you want the player to be like, oh, I hate these enemies. You want them to have that personal connection to the enemies by making the game difficult and frustrating, but you ultimately want to make it fun and satisfying to do it. And I will admit, it's satisfying to, you know, wipe out the Wizrobes and wipe out the likes and be like, take that, that's what you get. But, like, when messing up punishes you so heavily, it makes me not want to do it at all. Like, I'll experience that frustration, and I'll experience that catharsis when I do win, but I don't even want to risk it because I know how harsh the penalties for messing up are. I don't know. And again, with Goma, it's not a problem to have a boss that dies in one hit and only is weak to one thing. But is that fun? Is it like a true test of skill to, you know, press the B button? Oh, I pressed the button. Another thing. So you know how I explained that arrows cost 1 rupee to fire each? So, like, just imagine it with me, if you would. So you go through the dungeon. Maybe you've died a few times. You've got the letter. You've been buying potions. You've been stocking up. Let's say you've got everything possible. You've got, the blue ring. You've got your magic shield. You've got your cool sword. You've got all the heart containers you can. And you just got back from grinding up enough rupees to get the magic shield. You've never made it to the end of the dungeon. This is your first time playing. So you're like, all right, I can't wait for the end of this dungeon. I'm going to see what sort of cool boss there is. You walk in, you see this little freaking crab scuttling around, and you're like, oh, all right, let's fisticuffs galore. Let's take this thing down a notch. You won't defeat me, Ganon. And you stab it with your sword, and you're like, well, that didn't do anything. And then you see it open its eye, and it's like, that's it. Now I'll stab it with my sword. And maybe it takes you the whole, but then, you don't do it. And then you're like, okay, maybe bombs. I could crack its carapace. You lay down a bomb. Nothing happens. You're like, boomerang, I don't know. Yeah, I didn't expect that to work. Like, maybe the magic rod that I picked up in this dungeon will damage it. And so it opens its eye. Magic rod! Oh, nothing happens. What did I expect? This thing's useless. Okay. You're like, recorder? Yeah. And well, I guess that old man did say aim for the eyes of Goma. Maybe I need to take out my bow and arrow and shoot Goma in the freaking eye. So you take out your bow and arrow, you get ready to shoot. You miss, once because, the eye closes. You're like, darn, you shoot again, but it's moving side to side, and you miss again. And its eye opens. It comes at you, and you're like, this is it. The perfect shot. And you get ready to ready an arrow. And, oh no, you're out of rupees because you just spent all your rupees on the magic shield. It turns out the only thing that could defeat Link was his crippling debt. Ganon wins! Nope, so I'm not sure, but I think you can leave the room after you start the battle. So you are free to go back, get at least one rupee, come back, shoot Goma in the eye. You do it. But you make a dungeon where the punishment for messing up is a huge monetary loss. And then you make a boss that can only be defeated with money. I don't hate Goma as a boss. It's fine in a vacuum, but in the context of Dungeon 6, and just in the context of the other bosses of the game, it sucks. And Dungeon 6 in the context of the other dungeons in the game sucks too. I'll still play it. It's not like I, am like, oh, well, I'm not gonna play Zelda 1 because of Dungeon 6. That would be stupid. But, still. There's so much in the way of Dungeon 6 being likable to me. And, like I said, maybe there's some hardcore Dungeon 6 fans out there. Maybe there's some people who, wake up every morning saying, can't wait to play through Zelda 1 again so I can re-experience Dungeon 6. When you get the magic rod, you're like, whoa, oh my god! And, you just start blasting it. Your sword's replaced, you're pop, 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 pop. You destroy everything, Maybe you see Goma and you write it little love letters in the dead of the night and slip them under your pillow and hope that Goma reads them in his dreams, shuts his eye and goes to sleep. Maybe that's you. I don't know, and maybe you're just a normal person who just really likes Dungeon 6. But I hate Dungeon 6. In a vacuum, it's fine. But considering the entire game around Dungeon 6 and how good the rest of the game is, how well designed it all is, how the punishments for, like, take for example the wall masters in Dungeons 1 and 7. They're a little more egregious in Dungeon 7 because of how big the dungeon is, you know. But like the wall masters in Dungeon 1, first dungeon of the game, you know, you get to the room right before Aquamentus, and when you touch the wall, this hand comes out, starts grabbing for you, and you know, like, saying, that's grabbing for me, it wants to get me. So you instinctively know, alright, there's an enemy coming to grab me, I need to fight it off, because if it grabs me, something is going to happen. You know, so you understand the consequence. Well, you don't understand the consequences, but you understand the danger you're in. And so you fight them off, and if they do grab you, then you get sent back to the beginning of the dungeon. You know, they're a bit of an underutilized mechanic, but still. You were presented with a danger. You didn't fully understand the danger, but you knew that you had to get it away from you, otherwise something was going to happen. And when it did happen, you took a little bit of damage and you went back to the beginning of the dungeon. Not too egregious, if I'm being honest. Wall masters are completely fine in my book. But likes, like, it's coming towards you. And it looks a little... It's not visually descriptive. Like, a wall master is very visually descriptive. It's a hand, you know, and it's clutching its fingers. It clearly wants to grab you. Like, it's chasing after you to grab you. And so you're like you clearly understand what it's trying to do. It's going to grab you and do something, so you have to fight it off. What does a like look like it's going to do, you know? Like, what is its goal? It's a little jelly monster. It's got a hole in the top, you know. You know, maybe if you stared at it long enough, you could say, well, it's maybe it wants to eat me. You know, maybe it wants me to put me in that hole and eat me. But, like, sure, I guess. But no. And then it grabs you, and you're like, oh damn, it grabbed me. So you're like, press the sword button, get it off. But if you hadn't damaged it beforehand, considering how much health likes have, you're probably going to lose your shield before that. So it gets you, and you're thinking, well, that was weird. And then maybe you look at Link and you notice his shield's gone, or maybe you get hit by a Wizrobe and you notice your shield is gone, and you're like, where'd my shield go? And then you think, the like grabbed me, it took my shield. So now you're thinking, God damn it, because you killed the like and you didn't get your shield back, so now your shield is just gone. So, well, now you're either going to press onwards and keep taking damage, you're going to try to move back and get battered and bruised along the way, or you're just going to die and get sent back to the beginning of the dungeon. I don't know. Either way, your shield is just gone, and you can't get it back. It's not like a wall master, you know, was like, alright, and as punishment for getting touched by me, you now lose all your bombs. They're all mine. Like, and, you know, yeah, it was reaching for you. It was reaching for your bombs. It took them all. So, yeah, so not only are you, you know, like, what if that was what wall masters was? What if they took your bombs? You know, they deal a little bit of damage, and now all your bombs are gone. So what do you have to do? Now you have to grind. Now you have to, you know, go kill a bunch of enemies, get a bunch of bombs, maybe buy them from a shop, I don't know. But that's what you have to do now. Likes are the same, but with an extra step. They cost you time. Like, getting rupees is not a difficult experience. It's a time-consuming experience. and it's not a particularly fun, time-consuming experience. Like, if an enemy is a slow enemy, like a wall master or a like, should punish you for getting hit because of how easy they are to not get hit by. And when you do get hit, you should be punished accordingly. But compared to the punishment from a wall master, the punishment from a like is just severe and not fun. I don't know if I've explained this very well, but like, I don't know. It's just not a good dungeon to me. It could be really good, but honestly, it's not. I don't know. And like I said, Dungeon 9 really does borrow heavily from Dungeon 6, but for Dungeon 9, like I said, there's so much more variety and intrigue and more to explore with Dungeon 9. Like, that's another thing. Dungeon 6 doesn't really have a lot of bombable walls. It's really just you walking from one room to the next, these plain, boring rooms full of, you know, maybe with a few blocks around with just the same 3 enemies over and over and over. Dungeon 9 really switches it up a lot. And there are a few more enemies in Dungeon 6. Like I said, there's the room with the Zols. You know, that's great. Love Zols. Zols and Fire. They're good once you have the right swords. Otherwise, they're just kind of annoying. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of my criticisms could be directed at some of the other dungeons in Zelda 1, you know? But personally, I think they should mostly be focused on Dungeon 6. You know, and I know this isn't going to change anything. This isn't going to make someone go, you know what? I always have hated Dungeon 6. It's not going to make someone write an angry letter to Nintendo saying, why did you make, you know, Zelda 1 like that, you know, what, 40 years ago now? Yeah. Your 40-year-old game is dog shit, dude. Why'd you do that? No. I just wanted to say that because I've always disliked Dungeon 6. And, I don't know, as you can see, I'm in the car right now, driving around. And I just figured, you know what the hell, I'll just take a bit of time to talk about Dungeon 6. And again, I want to stress, Zelda 1 is one of my favorite games. I love the sense of exploration, all the items you can get, you know, the world to explore, the interesting dungeons, you know, the cool enemies, all that kind of stuff. I really love Zelda 1. And I think having such negative opinions on Dungeon 6 kind of retroactively makes me love it a little more, because as much as I love the rest of the dungeons, none of them like inspire the same feelings in me as Dungeon 6 does, you know? The second quest, it does a bit more, like more in the good way, but Dungeon 6 really makes me passionately angry at it, you know? And I really do appreciate that about it. So, who knows? Maybe it's secretly good. Maybe the suits at Nintendo were like, alright, this is gonna be genius. They're gonna hate it so much that they retroactively loop around to loving it. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's the case. I can't really speak on the matter. I'm not a game designer. You know, I don't make games. I just play games. So I don't know, maybe I do have to take back what I said at the very beginning of the video. Maybe I don't hate Zelda, Dungeon 1, Quest 1, Dungeon 6. Oh, what did I just say? Maybe I don't hate it with, you know, all of my soul and such burning passion. But I still hate it. I still never want to play it. I would never... If someone sat me down in a room and said, alright, you can play any one level of any game in the world, the last level that I would choose would be Dungeon 6 from Zelda 1, Quest 1. And hey, All I can say is that Zelda 1 Quest 2 Dungeon 6, amazing. I love it. I love all the Quest 2 dungeons, you know? They're great. You know? But I don't know, just to wrap it up, you know, all my homies hate Dungeon 6, and now you do too. Alright, peace.